Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is episode 146 of the Meet the Farmers podcast, and I'm your host, Ben Eagle. Now, I have a bit of an admission to make about this one. The absolute dread of a podcaster is when something doesn't record, and that happened last week. But I cannot thank my guest today enough for being the most wonderful, patient person that she is. We're doing all this again. So today on the show, I'm heading to the beautiful Leicestershire Wolds, just north of Melton Mowbray, to meet dairy farmer Ruth Grice. Ruth milks around 180 pedigree Holsteins, selling milk to Long Clawson Dairy, which is just 5 miles away from the farm, to make the world famous Stilton cheese. She also works part-time for Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust. Ruth, I should say, welcome back to the podcast.
Hello. Our first recording, Ben, was just a dress rehearsal.
It was. But thank you so much for doing this again. So before we talk about you, let's talk about the Leicestershire Wolds. What's it like where you are?
Well, as you mentioned, it is a beautiful landscape. It's not the Peak District, it's not the Lake District, but to me, it's home, and it's a very beautiful mixed farming landscape. If you were here today, it's a bit overcast, but you'd find a landscape that's sort of peppered with small fields, lots of hedgerows, lots of hedgerow trees. In the coming weeks, the fields will start filling up with sheep, lambs. A few have already started on that front. Few beef suckler herds, lots of dairy farms, lots of farms like ourselves supply Long Clawson Dairy, and there's a few arable farms thrown in the mix as well. It's not a very wooded landscape. A lot of that was cleared around 1100s. I think that's just a sign of the fact that it is really good farmland, sort of grade 2, grade 3 soils, very accessible, and food has been produced in this area for a long, long time. It's no sort of no area that Melton Mowbray is known for its sort of pork pies, Stilton cheese, lots of brilliant, fantastic food, because this area is so good at producing it.
That is a great sales pitch. I'm sure that the local tourist information will be very, very proud of you there. And of course, it's the place where you grew up as well.
It is, yes. Lucky enough to grow up on the farm here with my 2 sisters. We're a small but very sort of close family, so very lucky to have both sets of grandparents within a mile of the farm, and just have some really lovely memories of growing up here. Yellow wellies would be horrified to hear the story I'm about to tell you, but just the memories of sort of riding on the back of the small baler sledge with my sisters, dad driving tractor, and then going into the Dutch barns afterwards and helping dad and grandfather load the bales onto the elevator and stack them at the top and then wonder how to get back down again. Just really nice stuff like that. Going into sort of teenage years, it felt like the farm shifted a little bit. Maybe it was me growing up a little bit, I'm not sure, but it kind of went into a phase of dealing with BSE, then dealing with foot and mouth, dealing with milk quotas. But at the same time, during those years, my parents also made the decision to move from being a flying herd. So we stopped going to the local livestock market at Melton Mowbray to buy replacement cows, to becoming a closed herd. Decided to go down the pedigree Holstein route. So just over 30 years ago now, and breeding our own stock. And in that process of joining the Holstein Society, we also joined the young breeders arm of that. And my sisters and I went to calf shows, spent weekends with cans of hairspray and hair dryers, getting our calves ready and walking them around the rings, trying my hand at stock judging, failing miserably, but trying to learn what a good calf or a good cow looked like. Did that sort of thing up until sort of GCSEs, A-level years, and then at that point left home and went on to university.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, during that time, did you ever think during your teenage years you might go straight back to the farm?
In all honesty, I didn't. It was my older sister who was a little bit more involved than I was. We all helped out on the farm during weekends, helping mum and dad finish off milking, for example. jobs such as those, but it was Sarah who was a member of Young Farmers. I never joined. Sarah went off to the University of Nottingham to do agriculture, and I chose to do geography at Sheffield. And I don't actually never really asked her if she thought that she'd go straight back to the farm. But for me, I didn't see a role. I didn't know what that would look like at that point in time.
Okay. So, I mean, why geography and why Sheffield?
So Sheffield is a million miles away from the farm in many senses, not geographically. It was far away enough that I was away from home, but also close enough that if I needed to get back here for whatever reason I could do. But it was, I chose Sheffield because it's not a campus university. The whole university is dotted around the city. And yeah, Sheffield's nothing like Melton Mowbray. It's quite a vibrant city. It's quite gritty, northern. I loved it. It was so different.
Melton Mowbray can be gritty, can't it?
Yeah, I'm glad I did my driving test in Melton. Let's put it like that. Nice and straightforward. Melton, quaint compared to Sheffield. And I'm not really a rebellious type of person. I love my rules and I love following them. But to me, going to Sheffield was kind of a bit of a rebellion, if you like. It was just like, you know what? I love growing up on the farm. I'm incredibly grateful to my parents and my family for giving me those experiences growing up. I couldn't have got them elsewhere, but I just needed to go and do something completely different. Yeah. And that is what Sheffield provided.
So when you were at Sheffield, did you know what you wanted to do afterwards?
There are a few things that did crop up that I explored. So my maternal grandfather was a pilot in the RAF, and I was aware that the RAF had a cadet scheme for university students. They still do, called the University Air Squadron. So within a few weeks of joining university, I also joined Yorkshire University Air Squadron, and I was a member of that for a good couple of years, and as well as doing even more experience that I'd never really done on the farm, like adventurous training, like going up flying in a little aeroplane every other weekend. It also sort of could lead to an officer job in the Royal Air Force if you wanted to take it down that route. And I explored that, but then decided as I got nearer and nearer the assessment, it didn't feel right, it wasn't me. And then I also looked into becoming a teacher. Yeah. And to explore that, did some volunteering in two very inner city schools in Sheffield, the primary school that then fed into the secondary school. And again, I don't regret doing it for a moment. It was a great experience, but equally came out just not feeling like it was the career I wanted to pursue. My heart wasn't in it. So yeah, graduated, definitely wanting to get a job, had itchy feet. I was ready to start earning some money, but didn't really have a fixed idea of what that looked like, and ended up just getting the first kind of job that I could get my hands on, which thankfully has led into my current career in the charity sector.
So give me some more details. So you're fresh out of uni. What's going through your head, and where do you end up?
I ended up working for a national welfare charity called the Royal Air Forces Association. They look after the welfare of serving and ex-serving RAF personnel, and there was a nice link there between what I'd done with the University Air Squadron and working the charity sector. Yeah, it was appealing. It sounds corny, but I just thought, well, actually, yeah, so it's a worthy organisation to sink my teeth into and just see what happens. And I really enjoyed it. It was a real buzz, raising money, knowing that it was going to make a difference to people's lives, and I still get that buzz 15 years later, still working in the sector. Yeah.
And then as a step on for that, so you're mixing charities, but also I suppose your countryside background and your environmental interest. I mean, you have worked in the environmental sector for quite some time now, and you've started actually with the Woodland Trust, then Berks, Bucks and Oxfordshire Wildlife Trust, then the Central UK Office of Wildlife Trust, and most recently Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust. Take me through some career highlights and perhaps your time with the Woodland Trust Festival.
Sure. I think when that job came up, it just felt like a meeting of two worlds. It's like, this just sounds perfect. I love
Yeah.
working in the charity sector, and yeah, just had this kind of shared value with the Woodland Trust of looking after the environment. I think without realizing it, most farmers are conservationists at heart. You just do stuff on your farm that's going to better the environment that you work within, partly because that makes good business sense, but partly because I think that's just what you do.
Yeah.
And it was great to combine those two worlds. I think I came out of it feeling that ancient woodland is one of my favourite habitats, in spite of the fact there isn't actually much in this local area. But it also introduced me to a sector that is absolutely full of just fantastic people.
Yeah.
You don't work for an environmental NGO to make your millions. And I think because of that, it attracts a certain type of person. You feel very, very passionate about what you do, whether that's hands-on conservation out in the field at a woodland site or otherwise, or frankly, if you work in HR or finance or fundraising like I do, you're kind of in it together. So that's been fantastic to work alongside some very knowledgeable and very passionate people, but also through working with them, I feel I have built up my knowledge of wildlife and habitats and species. Still terrible at bird ID. Sorry, all my colleagues who've tried endlessly over the years to raise my knowledge of birdsong and bird ID. I do try, but I still do get very excited when I see birds, and then moments later realise that they're pigeons. But can't have everything, I suppose.
And I mean, what about with the Central Wildlife Trust?
So that was quite a different job. So I'd been down at Berks Nottingham Wildlife Trust, been kind of like at the coalface of conservation, local wildlife trusts. They are literally rooted in the local community, wherever they're based up and down the country. Whereas the UK office is quite different. There are 46 wildlife trusts up and down the country, and the UK office is there as a kind of umbrella organisation. It's not a head office, it's a central office. That title is there for a reason, and they're not really there to, it's not a top-down relationship. They're there to add value, to support wildlife trusts, and where there are issues that are regional or national, particularly on the sort of the policy side of things, they will work alongside wildlife trusts to give a greater voice. And my role there was also in a fundraising marketing function, but it was to try and add value to local wildlife trusts within their fundraising functions, predominantly to do with membership. So there are over 870,000 individual members across the wildlife movement, and a lot of work goes into making sure that those members feel valued, they're thanked, they continue to want to work and support the wildlife trusts, but also a lot of work to welcome new members to the movement as well. And there's a lot of fantastic stuff that goes off around the movement, but when you're at the cold face, it's very heads down, you just get on with it.
Yeah.
You need someone, much like what the AHDB do, to look out for those moments of best practice, who's doing what really, really well. And I know you're all a very, very modest bunch, much like farmers a lot of the time, but I'm going to shout about what you've just done from the rooftops, because actually I think other wildlife trusts should steal with pride from you. And we're all better because of that. So it was a great opportunity to put my ear to the ground, to learn about wildlife across a much, much larger area, across the whole of the country. And then I've taken that knowledge myself and try to implement that in my current job, which is back at the coalface for the Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust. Okay.
You've lived in a few different places, including Oxford for a time when you were down south working for that particular wildlife trust. This is going to be a tough question, but where's been your favourite place to live?
Oh my gosh, I think the farm will always be home. I think I'm like a bit of a homing pigeon, and this farm has this weird magnet. And when I'm here, when I'm driving down the lane, you start off on either side of the road, it's neighbouring farmers' land, and then you get closer and closer to the farm, and then you come into our little pocket of land, and I just feel like, I'm back.
Yeah.
And it's my happy place. So I think this is always going to be like at the top of the list.
Yeah.
But I loved living in Oxford.
Yeah.
It was an opportunity to go somewhere on my own. No one knew me, and I just started from scratch. And I needed that at the time. And Oxford's a fantastic city. It's, again, very different from Melton Mowbray, for different reasons to Sheffield. I think it definitely, the experience widened my horizons, and I met people who I hadn't met at university or school or the start of my career. You know, very different, say, political viewpoints, and you know, broaden horizons in that sense. But also the culture of Oxford, you can't really compare to Melton, I'm sorry. And then just also being able to hop on a train. You know, when I first moved to Oxford, you could get a one-way ticket to London on the train for £4 if you got it. It was insane. I don't know what it was, whether it was like a scheme at the time, or the Oxford Tube bus, which was cheap as chips and ran almost 24 hours a day. So just having London on my doorstep and being able to, you know, go and visit friends there at a weekend at a moment's notice, where you can't really do that the same back up in the East Midlands in the same way.
Yeah. That aside, you did come to a decision roughly about 4 years ago to come back home, as you say, back to the farm. Take me back to that sort of decision process, and what was it that brought you back?
There was a moment when I was working at the Wildlife Trust down in Oxford, and we were fundraising for the purchase of a new nature reserve called Meadow Farm, beautiful nature reserve in Buckinghamshire. And I was working alongside a colleague called Mark, and we were trying to piece together a fundraising case to make to various people who we thought might want to support the project. And I just remember like a very small comment that Mark made to me, but it just really hit home. And he just said, I'm so excited to work on this project because this is where I grew up. And this is the part of the Berks, Bucks and Oxford Wildlife Trust that I know is where my heart is. And I just thought, oh, I love working here, but I will never feel that in this patch because I didn't grow up here. And I think for me, that those roots are important to me. And I think it was that moment where it started to then niggle and develop to the point where I was like, actually, not now. And that happened a few years before moving back. But when the moment's right, I think that is where my heart is, and that's where I want to end up.
Let's turn to the farm. You've given us a bit of detail about the herd, and obviously it's a closed herd. But give me some more info about them. And of course, you are selling to Long Clawson Dairy as well. So yeah, a bit of info about the farm, and also what Long Clawson are looking for in terms of your milk.
Sure. So the farm itself, we own 118 hectares. Much of that, about 80% of that is grassland all year round. And then we use wheat, barley for whole crop, and maize as break crops in that grass rotation. We also rent out additional grazing land as well, and we turn our cows out anytime now, sort of early mid-April, when the weather finally gets better.
It is spring, honest. Apparently.
It's really cold today, my God. I mean, the actual ground, it feels quite firm, but it's just, it's very cold. Our cows are pedigree Holsteins / princesses. So when the weather gets a little bit better, they'll go out and they'll stay out till October alongside dry cows and young stock. As you say, we're closed herd and have been for over 30 years. So our breeding program is really important to us. The herd genetics, really important. And since joining Long Clawson Dairy, that is predominantly led by what they are looking for in our milk, which number one, first and foremost, is the milk solids, the fat and the protein, the stuff that makes the cheese as delicious as possible. So that drives our genetic program. We aim to carve 25% of our calves to Holstein replacement heifers, and we use 100% sex semen now on that. And then everyone else is served to beef. We use AI, and they're served to either Aberdeen Angus or to British Blue. I farm in partnership with my parents, which I really enjoy. I feel very lucky to work alongside them, have a really good working relationship. And I think that kind of ethos of working together links nicely into other things that Long Clawson Dairy is looking for. So absolutely, the milk solids are very, very important. Clean milk's very, very important in terms of the cell count and the Bacta scan. They want to make good cheese and have a really good starting product to do that with. So I am obsessional about our daily cell count and Bacta scan results. But yeah, Long Clawson are looking beyond that. They want that we're a small cooperative, just over 30 farmers, all based within Nottinghamshire and Leicestershire. Nice. And it's critical that we work together as a co-op, that we look after each other, that we've got each other's backs, and that's a very respectful relationship between one another. I feel very fortunate to be part of that. It's great that because of the size of Long Clawson Dairy, we do have a lot of contact with one another. We have producer meetings where you can have face-to-face conversations with the chief executive, with the senior management team, with the farm liaison director. They're a phone call away all the time, and that's I think that adds to that sort of ethos of working together as a cooperative, and also comes out in another critical area for them, which is going above and beyond the red tractor standards. So we have our own document called Clawson Care 365. We've had it for a few years now, and that's an initiative that makes sure that we are always striving to be as good as we can be in terms of animal welfare, in terms of environmental standards. Red tractor is the bedrock of that, and we all adhere to that, but it's going beyond what's what are the leaders looking for, and can we match that or go beyond that ourselves?
There are quite a few challenges that are facing the dairy sector at the moment. Just something we talk in, week in, week out on the Kite podcast. Give that a plug. Go over and listen to that, listeners. But in terms of challenges on your farm, perhaps feeding into those wider industry challenges, what's sort of top of the list for you?
Top of the short-term list, and unfortunately I think medium-term list as well, is the cost of inputs. We've had a couple of feed deliveries in the last couple of weeks, feed and fuel, and on both occasions the delivery drivers had said to us, if you'd had this delivery a few days later, it would have cost even more. And that's really scary. It's very scary when you're trying to do a cash flow forecast and you're not really sure what it'll be like in a month's time. Who knows? And that's not even thinking about the likes of fertilizer either, the really big ticket items. But on the longer term horizon, challenges which I think could also be opportunities are things like the phasing out of the basic payment scheme. It's pretty scary to think what that landscape will look like when payments finally finished, and then also going back to previous discussions about sort of improving animal welfare standards, improving our herd health, as well as reducing our impact on the environment. They are challenges in that we need to focus more attention into both of those areas, but equally there are opportunities. As business men and women, I don't think anyone would put their hand up wanting to be subsidised for the product they produce. And wouldn't it be great actually if we can develop a business model where we're not reliant on the BPS to make a profit as an industry? But we're there at the moment, and we've got to find other ways to make up that income, easily said. And as for animal welfare standards and environmental standards, well, that's the right thing to do anyway, and something that we as a nation, I think, should be continually proud of the standards that our farmers do adhere to and want to strive to do better on as well. Yeah,
something that dairy farmers seem to be I'm going to say leading the way, actually. It seems that way. It does seem to be, in terms of carbon and sort of planning for a carbon future. I mean, you completed a carbon audit on your farm last year, 2021. I'm really interested in terms of what you learned from that as a result, and have you changed anything that you're doing as a result of doing that?
It was a really interesting experience. I think I think one of the things I've learned about it is that you can get sucked into this carbon rabbit hole that can become very data driven, very complex and scientific. And there is absolutely a right place for that. But I've had to step back from that with my farming hat on, keep it simple, and let's keep hold of the actual ethos of this. This is just to lower our carbon emissions. And I think that's the second thing. I went into it thinking about both sides of the arguments, lowering carbon emissions and increasing carbon capture opportunities. And we absolutely want to do both, but the primary focus for us, driven by Long Clawson Dairy, who are doing this in partnership with all of their producer farmers, is to reduce that carbon footprint, that carbon emissions. There is no point in getting more carbon storage out there if you're still going to be emitting as much carbon, if not more, as you were before. You know, that's called greenwash, and a lot of businesses unfortunately do go down that route. So that was one thing that came out of it. The second thing, I think, just learning about what the UK landscape for dairy farming looks like in terms of carbon emissions was really interesting. So on our farm, we have had a slightly better result than the average UK dairy farm, but to put that into perspective to global dairy farming was quite interesting. So the UK average is 1.25 kilograms carbon equivalent versus 2.9 kilograms for the world entirely. And the NFU has this great stat that there are 278 million cows worldwide. And if all dairy farmers across the globe were as efficient as UK dairy farmers, we would only need 76 million cows worldwide. And that's quite significant. It really puts it into perspective. I'm not saying we're perfect and we should rest on our laurels, but it just, it made me sit back and think, actually, I was really worried about this, but I can just take that pressure off a little bit. In terms of what we're doing, the audit we went down focused on the 4 Fs, which in terms of keeping it simple, I love it. It's great. It's easy to remember. So fertility, we are aiming to reduce the age of our heifers when they have their first calf, so that they're working sooner rather than later. Fertilizer, aiming to reduce input, which hasn't been hard this year in light of prices. We want to make it go as far as we can. Feed, we have extended our grazing operation through the summer months. And then on the fuel side of things, we've gone for a minimal tillage approach to our field work to save on fuel. But I think all of those things we would want to be doing anyway as a business. They all make good business sense. So the age at first calving, that's in our herd health plan and was in there before we did the carbon audit. The fertilizer, as I said, that makes complete sense a bit right here, right now anyway. In terms of the minimum tillage, yes, we're not using as much diesel in our tractors, but equally we're not disturbing the soil. And it's really important for us that in terms of the carbon storage, we don't disturb our soil. We keep that at a minimum to keep that carbon locked up, to keep the soil structure as healthy as it can be.
And let's just turn to some of the environmental projects that you've got going on the farm. You've done a lot as well, including a particular project with Severn Trent Water, which you completed in 2020. And that was to plant 9,000 native hedgerow trees on the farm. That's a lot of plants. What was that experience like?
Quite overwhelming in a good way. But so I'd heard of this fantastic scheme that Severn Trent Water are running called the Great Big Nature Boost, and I heard about it through my work at Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust, and they have their own sort of environmental targets that they want to reach and want to do that in partnership with landowners across their water catchment area. So that can be Wildlife Trust, but it can also be local farmers. And I just contacted them out of the blue with this proposal to put hedgerows back into some of our fields where they had been during the 1980s. They'd become overgrown, unproductive, took up lots of space in the fields, taken out, but never got around to replacing. And yeah, to my complete surprise, they said yes. They were up for supporting the cost of them.
It's like, oh, gonna do it now.
Yeah, I know. It's the moment when I said to my dad, yeah, I've just ordered 9,000 tree saplings. And the moment when they arrived on this lorry in the dark, in the rain, in one February evening, and this chap unloaded 4 big pallets of them. And it was like, it's just the one, isn't it? Oh, no. It's that one, and that one. Anyway, we all did a bit of tree planting. It was a good team effort. But in the end, yeah, I don't think I fully appreciated just how long it takes to plant 9,000 tree saplings, albeit ones that are only 60 centimetres tall. And got to the stage where my partner Alex would sort of say, please, let's not go tree planting in the snow again this weekend. So yeah, we got contractors in to help us out with the final bits of that project.
Yeah. So taking a sidestep, you completed an MBA at the Royal Agricultural University in Cirencester. Why did you do that? When did you do it? And tell me all about that experience.
So I did that whilst I lived in Oxford. I think it was definitely after I started thinking about moving back to the area. And at the time, I kind of felt my career could go in 2 directions, either the farming routes or equally within the Wildlife Trust movement. I had a very inspiring chief executive at the Berks Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust, and kind of just thought, oh God, I'd love to follow in her footsteps. Yeah. I still feel being a chief executive of Wildlife Trust would be like one of the coolest jobs.
Yeah. Well, if anything, I mean, this is only literally the second time I've ever spoken to you, and yeah, I think you'd be bang on that job, definitely.
Oh, thank you.
Go for it.
So Philippa had an MBA, and I thought, oh, that sounds like a really, a useful and interesting qualification to sink your teeth into. And I was aware that the Royal Agricultural University was based not too far from Oxford. It's about an hour away. Yep. And looked at their prospectus, and noticed they had an MBA. So I thought, well, I just want to go for it. I felt like I did my undergraduate degree because that's what you did after your A-levels. And I did enjoy it, but I did it because it was just a thing to do. Whereas this was an opportunity to indulge myself into some sort of learning on my terms. Yeah. I was paying for it. I was taking time out of my working diary. And I think I really valued the opportunity because of that. Yeah. And it was just like, standard MBA, all the business modules with farming add-ons as well. And it was a fantastic opportunity to learn more about the industry. I felt that if I wanted to go down the farming route, I didn't feel like I had any qualifications to do that. I don't really have any knowledge. Yes, I grew up here, but farming has changed beyond recognition between the period of leaving here for university when I was 18 to my late 20s, as was at the time, and felt like I needed like a badge almost to sort of say, well, I have value I can add value to this industry, and that's, yeah, I definitely felt like that course gave me that.
How do you find it as someone with a farming background working in the conservation sector and vice versa? I speak to a few people who are sort of in your sort of similar position, and similarly, yeah. So someone who works for a conservation organisation, working in farming as well. How do you find that sort of relationship?
So I think, there was this bizarre moment early on in my career where I didn't really talk about being a dairy farmer's daughter, because I definitely couldn't call myself a dairy farmer at that stage, because it felt like the two worlds were poles apart. But there was just something that made sense to me inside that, well, of course I'd want to work for the conservation sector because I love it. Yeah. And that love has been given to me by my parents and my grandparents, because of the work that they do. Like the land on this farm has been, love has been ploughed into it quite literally by my father and my parents and grandparents, etc. So definitely share those values, but didn't really see where the two lines could meet all the time. Okay. And it's only recently, within the last few years, where that has started to happen in a very practical way. So, organisations, collective groups of people like the Nature Friendly Farming Network,
yeah.
when I look at that, or I listen to another podcast, little plug, you're like, oh my God, this is it. This is where my two worlds collide. And I'm on this farm, we don't have huge areas of land that we can rewild, for example, and give back to nature in its entirety. So it's always a balance. And I still feel like it might seem a little bit odd to some people that a conventional dairy farmer is also a massive nature lover.
Yeah.
I am a tree-hugging dairy farmer. I'm proud of it. Those two worlds can exist.
Yeah.
And it's been brilliant seeing more stories from within the farming industry come out of the woodwork. And a lot of the time, it's not stuff that people have just started doing because it's become the thing to do, regenerative farming or nature-friendly farming. A lot of the time, these are stories of people doing this for decades because it's just felt right. That's what they wanted to do. And I suppose there's a little bit of friction between the two worlds for me, is this unaware status of that. The Wildlife Trust movement, for example, perhaps not always realising that there's a whole world of farmers out there who are already doing some amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Like really amazing stuff. Yeah. But actually they're just either so modest about it, or frankly, they're just heads down, get on with the day job, that you don't really hear about it.
Yeah, exactly.
There are absolutely farmers who push the limits and should be brought to task about land management. But there are more farmers on the other side who should be put on a pedestal and shouted loudly about.
Challenges, but also hopes for your year ahead. That could be on the farm, that could be at work, that could be otherwise. I
think staying in business is quite a big challenge at the moment.
Yeah.
I know that sounds very doom-mongery, but I think, for every farmer out there at the moment, the rising cost of inputs is scary. The cost, the price for our milk is going up, and I'm very, very thankful to Long Clawson Dairy for taking action on that front. But there's always going to be a bit of a time lag. And I keep hearing the George Eustace comment about amazing milk prices, best ever in 20 years. Well, sure, but there's a but.
Exactly.
Goes with that.
There's always a but.
Yeah, and we, that other little catchphrase, you can't go green if you're in the red. There's so much stuff that I would love to see this business do on the environmental front, on the animal welfare front, but we can't do that if we're not profitable, if we're not making money as a business. So I think, that's a challenge. And I think just staying adaptable, which I think the farming community, the more I learn about farmers out there, the more I realise what an amazingly resilient bunch of people farmers are. Very, very adaptable, highly adaptable. And frankly, I don't think you'd still be in the farming business if you weren't of that mindset. Had enough challenges thrown at us through the years. Keeping ears to the ground and learning from others, I think.
Cool. We will turn to the last two questions of the show. The first is, if you have a message for the public, what would it be?
I think for me, it's putting your money where your mouth is. I applaud anyone who challenges the farming industry over how their food is produced. I think that's fantastic. And I would hate for any member of the general public to stop doing that. But I would love for that passion to see itself through to the supermarket shelves, and most importantly, to the supermarket tills. And I am as guilty as anyone for being programmed to look for those best value offers. What's exactly. 3 for £10? I do my online shop, I do it as quickly as possible, and then my beans arrive and they're flown in from Kenya, and I know they're in season in the UK. I'm as bad as anybody else. But if you're going to challenge farmers to do the right thing, then consumers should do their part as well, if they're able to.
And finally, a message for farmers.
So this one, again, I think as much for me as anybody else, but I think it's listening to public opinion, listening to what our consumers want. And the thing I think back to is around veganism and whenever I used to hear that word, I think I automatically put my head in the sand, put my fingers in my ears. I didn't want to talk about it. Immediately thought of people protesting outside our farm, which we have had in the past.
Okay. Yep.
And not wanting to hear our side of the story, so you just don't give it. And then this time last year, I was lucky enough to go on this fantastic communications initiative called Just Farmers.
Yeah, there we are.
And yeah, it was brilliant, led by Anna Jones. And in the evening on the first session, we had a meal together, albeit over Zoom because it was in the middle of lockdown. And we all had a vegan takeaway meal. And then before we ate it, the company came onto Zoom to talk to us a bit about their products, but more so about the people that buy their products. And there was just this penny dropping moment where he just said, people buy our products because they love animals, they care about animal welfare, and they love the environment. And I just sat there and thought, oh my God, that's me.
Yeah.
That's all of us here, this small group of farmers. Those are things that we value. So actually, I haven't been asking questions. I haven't been listening to people who choose plant-based products, either completely or part of the time, because I've not wanted to hear what they've got to say. And because of that, I've kind of lost out a lot of value from that conversation. And maybe as well, it was a bit of a mirror in the face moment. Maybe as an industry, we haven't actually, in years gone by, done enough to share those values that actually are at the absolute heart of what we do, looking after our animals and looking after the landscape which we work in.
That's a great point to leave it on. I think we'll leave it there. But Ruth, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for coming on again, I might say, and going through that whole experience again, because it's been such a pleasure having you on, and I hope that everyone's taken a lot from your story, and good luck both on the farm and with the Wildlife Trust moving forwards as well.
Thank you.
Before we go, how can people follow you on social media?
So I'm on Instagram and I'm on Twitter. Both handles are the same, so it's at Ruth Dairy Farmer.
Perfect. Thank you very much for listening. As always, please do subscribe to the show wherever you're listening if you don't already, and tell other people about it if you think that they would enjoy the show as well. Next time, I will be heading to Oxfordshire to speak to arable farmer Matthew Izod. I hope you can join me then. But until then, have a great week.